Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News, an Indian perspective on All India Radio. This is Nishit Kumar bringing glimpses of major developments of the day from across the globe. The headlines. U.S. House of Representatives passes the Uyghur Forced Labor Disclosure legislation. India supports Minsk Group's call for an immediate ceasefire in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict zone. Over 50 Republican former U.S. national security officials joined groups endorsing Joe Biden over Donald Trump for president. The European Union launches a legal case against the UK for undermining Brexit deal over the internal market bill. And in French Open tennis, Serena Williams bid for a 24th Grand Slam title cut short due to injury. The United States House of Representatives have passed the Uyghur Forced Labor Disclosure legislation. It would require U.S.-listed companies to disclose if their supply chains are connected to forced labor in China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Last month, the House of Representatives had passed the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. The act bans imports of products into the U.S. that were made with forced labor in Xinjiang and sanction persons involved in labor trafficking. Human rights groups have accused the Chinese authorities of detaining more than 1 million people. These include mostly Uyghurs, Kazakhs and Kyrgyz in a network of detention centers as part of an assimilation campaign. Hong Kong police today arrested 69 people for trying to gather and protest against the national security law imposed in the semi-autonomous territory by Beijing on June 30th this year. The law punishes anything China sees as subversion, separatism, terrorism and collusion with foreign forces, with up to life in prison. The protesters chanted pro-democracy slogans during the National Day ceremony. Police had banned the protest, citing restrictions owing to pandemic on group gatherings and violence at previous marches. According to reports, the protesters also wanted to demand the return of 12 Hong Kong people who were arrested by Chinese authorities in August. The presidents of France, Russia and US called on Thursday for an immediate ceasefire between Azerbaijan and ethnic Armenian forces around Nagorno-Karabakh. They appealed for peace as the death toll rose in the heaviest clashes since the 1990s. The three constitute Organizations for Security and Cooperation in Europe's Minsk Group. It was set up in 1992 to mediate in the decades-old conflict over the mountainous enclave. Reacting to the call, Turkey said that three countries have no role in the peace moves as they have neglected this problem for nearly 30 years. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that a lasting ceasefire could be achieved only if the American occupiers withdrew from Nagorno-Karabakh. Meanwhile, India has expressed its support for the Minsk Group to resolve the conflict. Spokesperson of the Indian External Affairs Ministry, Anurag Srivastava, said that India believes that any lasting resolution of the conflict can only be achieved peacefully through diplomatic negotiations.
India is concerned over the situation which threatens regional peace and security. We reiterate the need for the sides to cease hostilities immediately, keep restraint and take all possible steps to maintain peace at the border. India believes that any lasting resolution of the conflict can only be achieved peacefully through diplomatic negotiation. In this regard, we support OSCE Minsk Group constituted effort for a peaceful resolution of the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
New Delhi has once again lambasted Islamabad for fomenting a fake narrative against India. At the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva, India exercised the right of reply to the statement made by Pakistan on Wednesday. India's representative in Geneva said that resorting to abusive and unacceptable language against India can't rectify Pakistan's dubious human rights record.
When it comes to accountability and justice for oppressing those standing for their rights, the pathetic state of affairs for journalists and human rights defenders is well known when the deep state could make prominent journalists disappear in broad daylight at the heart of Pakistan. We are not baffled that Pakistan does well when it comes to inciting hatred against religious minorities and targeting our leadership with hate speeches. Its well-cherished and inherited culture of hatred makes it the perfect candidate for carrying forward the legacy of intolerance against anybody having modern views on human rights.
This is All India Radio giving you the world news. More than 50 Republican former national security officials will endorse Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden on Thursday. They will be joining one of the several Republican organizations opposing the re-election of President Donald Trump. Collectively, the groups object to Trump's alienation of the U.S. allies and his leadership at home. They are opposed to Trump's handling of the coronavirus and his reaction to nationwide protests over racial injustice and police brutality against black Americans. The Trump campaign has described Republican-led groups campaigning for Biden as disaffected former officials. It said they were trying to take down the duly elected president of the United States. The European Union on Thursday launched a legal case against the United Kingdom for undercutting their earlier divorce deal. Controversy over the UK's new internal market bill has thrown the tortuous Brexit process into a fresh crisis. The UK says ensuring that its nations can trade freely with each other after Brexit would require breaking the divorce deal provisions on the sensitive Irish border. The EU is adamant, however, that it would not implement any new UK deal as long as London undermines the divorce treaty. The EU has asked Britain to remove the problematic parts of the draft bill by the end of September. With the deadline ending yesterday and London not budging, EU's Executive Commission initiated the legal procedure that it uses against countries that violate the bloc's laws. London now has a month to reply to Commission's former letter of complaint. The 19th round of Foreign Office consultations between India and Myanmar was held through virtual mode today. During the consultations, both sides reviewed the entire gamut of relations, including border cooperation and the ongoing restoration work on earthquake-damaged pagodas in Bagan. Both sides expressed satisfaction that despite the ongoing COVID pandemic, meetings in several areas, including power, energy, etc., have been held through virtual mode, reflecting the depth of the bilateral engagement. The Indian side reiterated the priority that the country attaches to its partnership with Myanmar is in accordance with India's Neighbourhood First and Act East policies. The UN chief Antonio Guterres has remarked that humanity is waging a war on nature and said that there is urgent need for mankind to rebuild the relationship with the natural world to avert the worst impacts of the climate crisis. He was addressing the UN Biodiversity Summit on Wednesday.
More than 60% of the world's coral reefs are endangered due to overfishing, destructive practices and climate change. Wildlife populations are plummeting because of overconsumption, population growth and intensive agriculture. And the rate of species extinction is accelerating, with some 1 million species currently threatened or endangered. Deforestation, climate change and the conversion of wilderness for human food production are destroying Earth's web of life. And we are part of that fragile web, and we need it to be healthy so we and future generations may thrive.
Now let us take a look at the coronavirus updates from around the world. According to WHO data, the number of infected cases has crossed 33.72 million worldwide. The UN has welcomed the latest commitment of $1 billion by governments, private sector, civil society and international organizations to the Access to COVID-19 Tools Act Accelerator initiative launched by the WHO. In India, the total COVID recoveries today crossed 5.27 million as the recovery rate improved to 83.53%. India has exceeded the 140 per day per million tests as advised by the WHO by more than 5 times. And moving on to sports, in the French Open tennis, an injured Achilles heel cut short Serena Williams' latest bid for a 24th Grand Slam title before her second round match yesterday. In the Indian Premier League cricket, Mumbai Indians has set a target of 191 runs for 4 wickets in their stipulated 20 overs. In its reply, Kings 11 Punjab had scored 72 for 3 wickets in 10 overs as per the latest updates. India is celebrating the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end this bulletin, let us listen to Vaishnava Jan by artists from Mauritius. And with that, we end this bulletin. See you at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News. Good night.